He never imagined that the first time he'd ever touch a billionaire would be with his mouth pressed desperately against hers, trying to keep her alive, while security guards pointed guns at his head and screamed at him to get away. In that moment, this single-dad janitor wasn't thinking about class, money, or consequences. He was thinking, if I stop now, she dies. What he didn't know was that this one decision, this one kiss to save her life, would flip his entire world upside down. It would cost him his job, his reputation, and almost his freedom, before it turned into the opportunity that changed everything for him and his little girl. But to understand how a janitor ended up with his lips on a billionaire heiress in the middle of a boardroom floor, with cameras rolling and people screaming, we have to rewind. Ethan Cole used to joke that his life could be summed up with three things: a mop, a lunchbox, and a little girl who called him daddy like the word was made of gold. He was 34, tall but always a bit hunched from years of cleaning floors and carrying too much responsibility on his back. His hands were rough, his shoes were cheap, but his eyes, those tired brown eyes, still had a softness whenever he looked at his daughter, Lily. Lily was 7, the kind of kid who asked way too many questions and believed her dad could fix anything with duct tape and a hug. Most mornings started the same. "Daddy, you forgot your coffee," she'd say, holding the chipped mug out to him in their tiny apartment kitchen. Ethan would smile, ruffle her curly hair, and kiss her forehead. "What would I do without my assistant?" he'd ask. "You'd fall asleep in the elevator," she'd reply, completely serious. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. He worked night shifts most days, cleaning offices, lobbies, and executive floors of the tallest building in the city, the Styling Tower. You know the type of place. Glass everywhere, marble floors, soft lighting that somehow always smelled like expensive perfume and power. The building was owned by the Sterling Group, a global conglomerate headed by one of the youngest billionaires in the country, Ava Sterling. To people like Ethan, Ava was a name on a plaque and a face on magazine covers. World's youngest tech billionaire. The queen of clean energy. The new face of philanthropy. To him, she was untouchable, like a star in the night sky. Beautiful, distant, and so far out of reach that it was almost funny. He never expected their paths to cross. Not really. The janitors were ghosts in that building. They came in when the offices emptied. They cleaned the desks, vacuumed the carpets, wiped away the fingerprints on glass doors. And when the sun came up and the important people arrived, the ghosts faded. Ethan liked it that way. Less attention meant fewer questions. Fewer questions meant he didn't have to explain why a guy who once studied engineering at a decent college was now scrubbing toilets. Life had happened. A surprise pregnancy. His girlfriend leaving when the baby was 3 months old. Medical bills when Lily had a lung infection as a toddler. Dropped out of school. Took whatever job he could find. You might know how that feels. When your life plan doesn't just get delayed, it gets replaced. But through all of that, Ethan had one rule for himself: Lily never feels poor. He worked double shifts. He skipped meals. He patched old shoes instead of buying new ones. Also, Lily could have crayons instead of bills on the table. Birthday cakes instead of eviction notices. He didn't care if he was mopping someone else's marble floors. As long as she was okay, he was okay. The Sterling Tower was like another planet compared to Ethan's tiny apartment. Downstairs, there was a lobby with a waterfall wall. Guests stood in front of it to take pictures for social media. Upstairs, there were entire floors with nothing but glass-walled conference rooms named after cities: Tokyo, Paris, New York. On the 60th floor was the executive floor, and at the very top, floor 70, was something most employees never saw: the Sky Boardroom. A long, sleek room with a view of the entire city. That room was Ava Sterling's kingdom. Ethan had seen it once, from the doorway, when he was called up to help with a spill. He'd walked in quietly, pushing his cart, while Ava and a group of people in suits were at the far end, arguing softly. He remembered thinking, "I don't belong here." He kept his head down, cleaned up the coffee spill near the entrance, and rolled his cart out without a word. That was the closest he had ever been to the billionaire. Until the night she almost died at his feet. It started like a normal shift. Ethan dropped Lily off with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, who watched her at night for a small fee and a lot of gratitude. "Call if she wakes up with a cough," he said. "She'll be fine," Mrs. Patel replied, patting his hand. Go, before you're late again. By the time Ethan clocked in at the styling tower, it was already past 9 p.m. The building had thinned out. Only a few floors still had lights on, where teams were grinding through late-night deadlines. He changed into his gray uniform, grabbed his cart, and started his usual route. Floors 10 through 25, then up to 40, 55, and finally 60. But that night, something was different. As he stepped into the service elevator, he noticed a group of men in black suits and apieces standing near the main elevators. Security. They weren't the usual nighttime guards he knew by name. These guys were different. Stiffer. More intense. One of them saw Ethan and did a quick visual sweep of him, like he was scanning for threats. Ethan looked away. He wasn't stupid. He knew what that meant. She's here. Ava Sterling wasn't in the building every day. She flew between cities, countries, continents. When she was in town, it was an event. And apparently, tonight was one of those nights. Big meeting. Ethan asked his friend Marco, another janitor, later that night. Marco shrugged. Heard something about a last-minute board thing. Investors. Lawyers. No idea. Must be important, Ethan said. Top-level securities here. He didn't think much of it. Billionaires did billionaire things. The rest of them just cleaned up after it. But if you've ever had that weird feeling, like the energy in a place is different, like the air itself is holding its breath, that's what it felt like on the 60th floor that night. Small signs. The light in the sky boardroom was still on well past midnight. Two assistants rushed past Ethan at one point, whispering urgently, I told you she shouldn't push herself like this. She'll be fine. It's just one more presentation. And if her heart... Stop it. Don't even say that. Words that didn't mean much at first. Not until later. Here's what Ethan didn't know that night. Ava Sterling wasn't just stressed. She was sick. Not the kind of sick you see right away. The kind of sick that hides under sharp blazers and perfect makeup. The kind that comes with a list of instructions from doctors. Rest more. Less travel. Fewer all-nighters. No intense emotional situations. Ava checked every box, except the last three. She had a rare heart condition, something she'd kept strictly private. Only a few people knew. Her personal doctor, her head of security, and her executive assistant, Nora. If the world knew, investors might panic. The press might feast. Competitors might circle like sharks. So Ava did what so many people in power do. She pushed and pretended she was invincible. On this particular night, they were finalizing a massive acquisition deal. Billions on the line. A board meeting that could decide the future of the company. It's too much for tonight, Nora had told her softly, just before the meeting. Ava had shaken her head. We don't get to choose when opportunities come. We only choose whether we show up. And what if your buddy doesn't show up with you? Nora replied. Ava had smiled tightly. Then we fake it. Those words would haunt her later, while Ava stood in a glass tower, going over slides and contracts. Ethan was on floor 55, wrestling with a busted vacuum. He cursed under his breath as the machine sputtered, then died. Not tonight, man, he muttered, tapping it with his foot. He glanced at his phone. It was past 1 a.m. He still had 5 floors to go, and Lily had a school recital at 8 a.m. If he didn't finish on time, he'd have to choose. Stay and risk being late for Lily, or leave unfinished areas and risk losing his job. He knelt down and opened the vacuum's bottom panel, fiddling with the belt. Every second that ticked by tightened the knot in his chest. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Patel. Lily coughing again. I gave her water. Just wanted you to know. His heart dropped. That old fear crept back in. The one from the night Lily had been rushed to the hospital as a baby. The sound of her tiny lungs fighting for air. The beeping machines. The doctor saying, You got here just in time, Mr. Cole. He texted back with shaky fingers. Please call me if it gets worse. I'll come right away. Then he forced himself to breathe, fixed the vacuum as best he could, and kept moving. Sometimes, when you're in survival mode, you don't realize you're in a story yet. You're just trying to get through the next hour. Meanwhile, far above him, the real storm was brewing. At the top of the tower, the sky boardroom looked like a movie set. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A massive table. Screens glowing with charts, graphs, and numbers. Around the table sat the board members and key executives. Some were tired. Some were irritated. Some were nervous. At the head of the table stood Ava. Her usually calm face looked strained. A faint sheen of sweat glistened at her temples, though the room was cool. She clicked through slides, her voice steady as she outlined the acquisition strategy. To secure this deal, we need to confirm the capital allocation by next week, she said. If we hesitate, Horizon will swoop in and take it from us. They're already circling. A man to her left, Victor Hale, leaned back in his chair. Victor was the CFO, sharpsuit, colder smile. The kind of man you just feel you shouldn't turn your back on. And if we overextend? Victor asked. If anything goes wrong with your aggressive timeline, we risk destabilizing our stock for the next quarter. My timeline is necessary, Ava replied. We've run the analysis. The cleantech division this acquisition gives us positions us ahead of everyone for the next decade. Victor's gaze lingered on her a little too long. Assuming, of course, that everything stays stable, he said. Nora, standing in the corner with a tablet, saw the subtle emphasis on that word. Her eyes flickered to Ava. They both knew what he was implying. What if something happened to Ava? What if her health failed? What then? But nothing was said aloud. Not yet. The meeting dragged on. Questions. Doubts. Debates. Ava's breathing grew more shallow. She shifted her weight subtly, gripping the back of her chair. Nora moved closer, whispering when there was a break. You need to sit down, she murmured. After we finish, Ava whispered back. Her heart was racing. A tightness had started in her chest. She knew the signs. She had pills in her bag. She should have taken a break an hour ago. But they were close. So close. That's the thing about strong people. You don't always see the moment when pushing becomes too much. Not until they fall. It was around 1:30 a.m. when Ethan stepped onto the 60th floor, pushing his cart. He always saved this floor for last. It was the quietest, the most intimidating. Tonight, though, it wasn't quiet. Through the glass, he could see shadows moving in the sky boardroom. Voices echoed down the marble hallway. This is reckless, Ava. We'll lose the deal if we slow down now. You're not listening. And then there was a loud thud. A chair scraped. Papers rustled. And then, Ava. A cry. Sharp. Panicked. Ethan froze. He wasn't supposed to go into the sky boardroom without permission. That was the rule. The unspoken barrier between people like him and people like them. But that sound. It wasn't frustration. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Before he could think, his body moved. He left his cart in the hole and ran toward the glass doors, his heart pounding. Through the clear walls, he saw chaos. Ava was on the floor. Her body was curled slightly, one hand clutching at her chest, her face pale. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. Board members stood frozen. Some shouted. Some backed away like they were afraid to be too involved. Nora was kneeling beside her, fumbling with Ava's bag. Call an ambulance, someone yelled. We're on the 70th floor. It'll take too long. Does anyone know what to do? I think she's having a heart attack. Ethan hit the door, but it didn't move. Security lock. He slammed his fist against the glass. Hey, he shouted. Open the door. Nobody even looked. They were too locked in their own panic. Nora's hand shook as she poured pills from a small bottle and tried to press them to Ava's lips. But Ava's jaw had gone slack. Her chest barely moved. She wasn't swallowing. Her body jerked once, then went frighteningly still. And in that split second, Ethan saw it, the way her chest stopped rising. He'd seen it once before, years ago. Not in a boardroom, but in a pediatric ward, when a nurse had shouted, "We're losing her," about his baby girl, and another nurse had started compressions. His vision went white around the edges. This wasn't just a CEO on the floor. This was someone's child. Open the door, he roared, slamming his shoulder into the glass. This time, someone heard. One of the security officers near the corner twisted a keycard, hissed something into his earpiece, and the lock clicked. The door slid open. Nora whipped around. Stay back, this is. Move. Ethan shouted, pushing past her and dropping to his knees beside Ava. For a second, everyone just stared at him, stunned. A janitor, in a gray uniform, kneeling next to a billionaire on the boardroom floor. What are you doing? Victor snapped. Get him out. Ethan tuned him out. His hands moved on their own. He tilted Ava's head back, checked her breathing. Nothing. No, 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 he whispered. Don't do this. He interlaced his fingers and placed his hands in the center of her chest, and started compressions. If you've ever watched CPR in movies, it looks clean. In real life, it isn't. It's messy. It's desperate. Bones can crack. Sweat mixes with tears. And the person doing it is powered by nothing but fear and hope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ethan counted under his breath, pressing down hard, using his body weight. Does he know what he's doing? Someone whispered. He's just a janitor. Shut up and let him work. Nora snapped, her voice shaking as she moved aside, allowing Ethan room. He counted to 30, then leaned down. This was the moment. The kiss. He pinched Ava's nose, parted her lips, and sealed his mouth over hers. But it wasn't romantic. It wasn't slow. It wasn't chosen. It was breath. It was life. He gave 2 quick breaths, chest rising and falling, then went back to compressions. Behind him, he heard the security guard's radio crackle. Medical emergency. Sky boardroom. Floor 70. Suspected cardiac event. Paramedics en route. The room spun with voices. What if he hurts her? We should wait for the professionals. She's not breathing, you idiot. Nora looked like she was praying silently, her hands clutched over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Come on, Ethan whispered. Come on. He kept going. Compress. 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 Breathe. That was the rhythm. Every time he pressed down, he remembered Lily in that hospital crib, the way the doctor had told him. She almost didn't make it. Not again. Not on his watch. A minute passed. Then 2. Time became blurry. At one point, Victor grabbed Ethan's shoulder. That's enough. Ethan shrugged him off with a force that surprised even himself. Do you want her to die? He shouted, voice raw. Victor's mouth snapped shut. Ethan leaned in again, giving another breath. Their lips met. His breath rushed into her lungs. His heart pounded so hard he felt like it might burst. And then, a sound. A small gasp. A cough. He jerked back and saw her chest heave. Her eyes fluttered. She sucked in air like it was the most precious thing in the world. Okay, Ethan whispered, almost laughing with relief. Okay, okay. Nora dropped to her knees. Ava, can you hear me? She said, voice breaking. Ava's lips moved weakly. She couldn't form words yet, but she was there. Alive. The room, which had felt like a tomb a moment before, came back to life. People started moving again. The security team rushed in fully now, some clearing space, some guiding the paramedics who'd finally arrived. Step back, sir, one medic said to Ethan. His arms trembled as he moved away. His knees were bruised. Sweat dripped down his face. He suddenly realized how dry his throat was. He stood there, breathing hard, watching as trained professionals surrounded Ava, placing an oxygen mask over her face, attaching monitors. Nora turned to Ethan. She whispered. You saved her life. For the first time since he'd rushed in, Ethan really looked around. Half a dozen board members stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Some looked grateful. Some looked offended, like seeing a janitor's mouth on a billionaire's had broken some unspoken rule. Victor's eyes burned into him with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't relief. It was calculation. And that look was the beginning of everything that came next. By the time the paramedics rolled Ava out on a stretcher, Ethan felt like someone had unplugged him from a power source. He stood in the hallway outside the boardroom, leaning against the wall. Say, are you okay? One of the younger security guards asked him. I'm fine, Ethan said, though his voice came out hoarse. I have to finish my shift. He turned as if to walk away. Nora grabbed his arm gently. Wait, she said. You can't just go back to mopping floors after that. He gave a weak, humorless laugh. I kind of have to, he replied. They don't pay me to do CPR. You knew what to do, she insisted. Where did you learn that? He stared at her for a moment, then shrugged. A nurse showed me once. When my daughter was sick, I made them teach me in case it ever happened again. Nora's eyes softened. You did something incredible tonight, she said. I'll make sure Ava knows. She will want to thank you properly when she's able. Just make sure she's okay, he said quietly. That's all that matters. He started to walk away again, but this time another voice stopped him. Not so fast. Victor. He stepped out of the boardroom, adjusting his tie. Ethan Cole, is it? Victor asked. Yes, sir, Ethan said automatically. He hated how small his voice sounded when he addressed men like this. Like he was a kid in trouble. Come with me, Victor said. We need to discuss what just happened. Nora frowned. He just saved her life, Victor. What is there to discuss? Victor smiled tightly. Everything, he said. In this company, everything is always about how it looks. Those words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. But he followed anyway. Because when you live paycheck to paycheck, and a man with power tells you to talk, you don't say no. They led him into a smaller conference room nearby. Victor closed the door. 2 security officers stood inside, arms folded. Ethan sat down slowly. Did I do something wrong? He asked. On the contrary, Victor said, sitting across from him. You performed CPR correctly. From what I saw, you may very well have saved Miss Sterling's life. Then, why do I feel like I am in trouble? Ethan asked quietly. Victor's eyes flickered. Because, he said, in cases like this, there are narratives to consider, legal implications, media risks. I don't understand, Ethan said. Victor leaned forward. Think about it, he said slowly. There will be a hospital report. There might be internal security footage, perhaps even audio from the room. Lawyers will ask questions. The board will want a full account. Okay, Ethan said. I'll tell them exactly what happened. And what did happen? Victor asked. In your own words. She collapsed, Ethan said. No one was doing CPR. So I did. I didn't have time to think. I just acted. And you performed mouth-to-mouth, Victor said. That's part of CPR, Ethan replied. I learned it years ago. It's not. So you kissed her, Victor said, his tone changing just slightly. Ethan blinked. I didn't kiss her, he said slowly. I was trying to keep her alive. But if someone saw only that part, Victor continued calmly, if someone saw a janitor's mouth on the unconscious CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, without context, what do you think they would assume? It hit Ethan all at once. The angle from the doorway, the sudden movement, the chaos. Someone walking in at the wrong moment might not see compressions. They might only see a man in a gray uniform, bending over a woman in an expensive dress, their mouths touching. His stomach dropped. No, he said. No, that's not what happened. I was giving her breaths. It's medical. I know that, Victor said. You know that. But do you really trust the media to see it that way? Do you trust gossip blogs, tabloids, competitors to tell the story fairly? Ethan's chest tightened. If this turns into a scandal, Victor continued, it could do catastrophic damage. Not just to Miss Sterling, but to the company. Share prices, partnerships, deals like the one we were discussing tonight. So what do you want from me? Ethan asked. I didn't do anything wrong. Victor smiled faintly. Of course not, he said. But what's more important here is making sure nothing looks wrong. We need to manage this carefully. Okay, Ethan said. So, what do I need to do? First, Victor said, you will not discuss this with anyone. Not your co-workers. Not your friends. Not on social media. No one. I don't even have social media, Ethan replied. Good, Victor said. Second, if anyone asks what happened, you will tell them Miss Sterling experienced a medical emergency and that paramedics handled it. You will not mention your involvement. But that's not true, Ethan said. It's not a lie, Victor replied smoothly. It's an omission, and it's necessary to protect the company. Ethan stared at him. He thought about Lily's recital in a few hours. Her bright eyes, her little voice singing in a crowded school gym. He thought about rent, groceries, the fragile stability he'd built on a janitor's paycheck. Are you asking me to pretend I didn't save her? He asked. Victor's eyes hardened. I'm asking you to understand how the world works, he said. You can keep your job. You can receive a generous bonus for your discretion. Or, if this becomes complicated, we may need to rethink your position, eh? There it was, the threat behind the smile. You might have been in a situation like that, where someone in power frames their demand like a favor, but every word is a warning. Do I have a choice? Ethan asked quietly. Victor shrugged. Everyone has a choice, he said, but choices have consequences. For you, for your daughter. Ethan's heart stuttered. How do you? Victor smiled faintly. We do background checks on all employees, he said. Single father. Financially vulnerable. A child who's had medical issues in the past. You have a lot to lose, Mr. Cole. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan nodded, jaw clenched. Fine, he said. I'll stay quiet. Excellent, Victor said, standing. Security will escort you downstairs. Take the rest of the night off. We'll be in touch. Ethan stood slowly. As he left the room, he felt like he'd just signed a contract in invisible ink. One he never wanted to be part of. If the story ended there, it would just be a quiet injustice. A janitor saves a billionaire's life, and no one ever knows. But that's not how this story goes. Because Victor Hale wasn't just trying to protect the company. He had his own plan. You see, in the weeks leading up to that night, Victor had been quietly positioning himself. Short-selling competitors. Whispering doubts about Ava's leadership to key board members. Laying the groundwork to eventually replace her. Her heart condition. To him, it wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. He'd already been collecting data, planning a time when he could convince the board that Ava was too unpredictable health-wise to continue leading. A gentle push into a chairwoman role while he took over as CEO. And tonight, when she collapsed in front of the board, it should have been perfect. Proof that she wasn't well. Proof that his concerns were valid. He hadn't planned for a janitor to burst into the room and bring her back. He definitely hadn't planned for that janitor to do it in a way that opened the door to gossip, scandal, or complication. So Victor made another plan. And step one was making sure that if a story came out, Ava was the victim of an inappropriate act, not a woman saved by a hero. Step one was turning Ethan from savior into suspect. The next morning, Ethan stood in the back of Lily's school auditorium, dark circles under his eyes. He clapped as she sang, tears stinging his eyes for reasons that had nothing to do with the song. "Daddy, did you see me?" she cried, running into his arms after. "I saw you," he said, scooping her up. "You were the star." For a moment, the night before felt like a bad dream. But when he got home, showered, and finally checked his phone, reality hit. There were messages from Marco. "Dude, heard something crazy happened last night on 70. You good? Security asking questions about who was where. You didn't do something stupid, did you?" And then one more. "Also, rumors, someone found you in the boardroom with the boss." Ethan's blood ran cold. He typed back, "I didn't do anything wrong. Don't listen to rumors." He put the phone down, trying to steady his breathing. At that exact same time, in a sleek office on the top floor, Victor was standing with the head of security, watching footage on a screen. It was grainy. From the overhead corner of the Sky boardroom, they watched as Ava collapsed, as chaos erupted, as Ethan burst in and started compressions. "Can you zoom in?" Victor asked. The guard complied, zooming closer as Ethan leaned down to give rescue breaths. On screen, for a few seconds, it looked intimate. His face close to hers, their mouths touching. There was no audio from that angle, just the visual. Victor paused the frame. "Take a screenshot," he said. "File it in case we need it." The guard hesitated. "With respect, sir, he saved her." Victor smiled coldly. "And he'll be compensated," he said. But we must protect Miss Staling. If he decides to twist this, to claim something, to sue, we need leverage, just in case." He placed a hand on the guard's shoulder. "This is about minimizing risk," he added. The guard nodded slowly, uneasily. The seeds were planted. Internally, quiet concerns began to circulate. A few executives received an email from Victor about an incident on the 70th floor. It was framed carefully. A lower-level employee entered the boardroom without authorization and made physical contact with Miss Sterling while she was incapacitated. While the intent appears medically motivated, we are reviewing whether protocols were followed. One phrase in particular stuck: made physical contact. No mention of chest compressions. No mention of saving her life. Just those 3 words, and a hint of impropriety. By lunchtime, the whisper had started. "Did you hear? Some janitor took advantage when she passed out. I heard security caught him kissing her. Is he fired yet?" The truth was still simple, but perception was already changing. 2 days later, Ethan was called into HR. He walked in, palms sweating. Inside sat a woman in a navy blazer with a neutral, practiced smile. Beside her was a man from security. And, of course, Victor. "Mr. Cole," the HR woman said. "Please sit." He sat slowly. "We're conducting a routine review of the events that occurred on Tuesday night," she said. "This is standard procedure." "Okay," Ethan said. "I already told Mr. Hale what happened." "Would like to go over it again," she replied, with clarity, "for the record." They asked him to recount everything, from hearing the thud to starting CPR. He told the truth, every detail. "And at what point did you perform mouth-to-mouth?" the HR woman asked. "When she wasn't breathing," he said. "Did anyone instruct you to do that?" she asked. "No," he said. "I didn't wait for permission. There wasn't time." "So you made physical contact with Miss Sterling, without verbal consent," she said, her voice clinical. He stared at her. "She was unconscious," he replied, incredulous. "There was no verbal consent. That's how CPR works." Victor leaned forward slightly. "No one is accusing you of having ill intent, Mr. Cole," he said. "We understand you were trying to help. But from a procedural standpoint, entering the room without authorization and touching the CEO is problematic." Ethan swallowed. "What was I supposed to do? Stand there and watch her die?" he asked. Silence. The HR woman cleared her throat. "We've also received word that some staff members have been discussing the incident inappropriately," she said, "suggesting that you and Miss Sterling were involved physically." "I didn't tell anyone anything," Ethan protested. "I haven't said a word." "Be that as it may," she continued, "this situation has created a potential liability for the company." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "So what happens now?" he asked. She slid a paper across the table. "We are placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately," she said, "pending the outcome of an internal investigation." Ethan's heart sank. "Leave," he repeated. "I have a daughter. I can't afford." "You will receive partial pay for the duration of the leave," she said, "assuming you comply fully." "And if I don't?" he asked. Victor's gaze hardened. "I'd strongly advise against testing that scenario, Mr. Cole," he said. "You're a hero in your own mind right now. But if the narrative shifts, you won't like how it looks." It was a threat, plain and simple. Ethan stood, chest scraping. "This is wrong," he said. "I saved her life. I shouldn't be punished for that." "Sometimes," Victor replied coldly. "Doing the right thing doesn't mean you get the outcome you deserve." If you've ever been punished for doing the right thing, you know that feeling. That mix of anger and helplessness that burns in your chest. Ethan walked out, carrying that feeling with him. He didn't know that, as he left, someone else had been listening. Nora. She stood just around the corner, unseen, her expression dark. And in that moment, she made a decision. If the system was going to turn on the man who'd saved Ava's life, she was going to turn on the system. A week passed. Ethan's life had entered limbo. He stayed home with Lily Moore, trying to act normal. But kids are sharper than we give them credit for. "Daddy," she said one afternoon, as they sat on the couch watching cartoons. "Why aren't you going to work?" He forced a smile. "Just a break," he said. "Grown-ups need breaks too." "Are you sick?" she asked. "Not sick," he replied softly. "Did you do something bad?" she asked. "That one hit hard." He swallowed. "No, baby," he said, pulling her closer. "I tried to do something good." "So why are you sad?" she asked. He didn't answer. Because how do you explain to a 7-year-old that the world sometimes flips upside down when you least expect it? On the other side of the city, Nora sat in her apartment with her laptop open, eyes red from lack of sleep. She'd been at the hospital with Ava every day. The good news, Ava had stabilized. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. With rest and treatment, she could recover. The bad news, Victor had positioned himself neatly as their acting leader, handling urgent company matters while Ava focused on her health. And every time Nora tried to bring up Ethan, Victor dismissed it. "He overstepped," he'd say. "We're managing it." But Nora had been in that room. She'd seen who actually did something while everyone else flailed. She wasn't going to let them erase that. So she started digging. First, she requested internal access to the emergency reports for Ms. Styling's recovery record. That gave her initial documentation, timestamps, paramedic notes, incident summaries. The paramedic notes clearly stated, patient found on floor, unconscious, non-responsive. Upon arrival, chest compressions and rescue breaths were in progress by male staff member, identified as Ethan Cole, janitorial. Patient regained spontaneous breathing shortly after. Proof. Then she pushed for security footage. That was harder. Victor had put a block on it, citing legal sensitivities. But Nora had been Ava's assistant for 5 years. She knew how the system worked. She knew people. Eventually, a sympathetic IT guy quietly slid a flash drive onto her desk with a whispered, "I shouldn't be doing this." On it, the footage Victor had been watching. She opened it on her laptop at home, fingers trembling. There it was. The whole scene, from start to finish. Not just the kiss moment. The compressions. The chaos. The urgency. When viewed in full, it told the real story. But she understood instantly how someone could take a still frame from the middle and twist it. She replayed the part where Ethan leaned in to give breaths. She zoomed in, frame by frame. No hesitation in his face. No lust. No opportunism. Just focus and fear. Nora closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. "This man saved her," she whispered. "And Victor is trying to hang him with it." She knew what she had to do. It would put her job at risk. Maybe her career. But sometimes, loyalty isn't to a company. It's to the truth. 2 weeks after the incident, Ava Sterling returned to the Sterling Tower. She walked more slowly than before, a subtle weakness in her step, but her eyes burned with renewed clarity. Facing your own mortality has a way of burning off illusions. The board had been careful, gentle. They'd suggested she take more time. They'd praised Victor for his steady leadership in a crisis. It all tasted like ash in her mouth. She didn't remember everything from that night. Just fragments. Pressure in her chest. Nora's voice. Darkness. And then warmth. Air filling her lungs. A voice whispering, "Come on." She woke up in the hospital with an oxygen mask and a doctor explaining how close she'd come. Someone began CPR immediately, the doctor had said. If they hadn't, you likely wouldn't be here. "Who?" she'd asked. The doctor had glanced at a chart. "A janitor, I think," he'd said. "Ethan Cole." Hospital machines didn't measure gratitude. If they did, hers would have overloaded. But when she asked Victor about Ethan, his answers had been vague. "It's being handled," he'd said. Handled. That word stuck in her mind like a splinter. So when she returned to the office, the first thing she asked Nora was, "Where's he?" Nora hesitated. "On leave," she said carefully. "HR has concerns." "What concerns?" Ava demanded. "He saved my life." Nora looked her in the eyes. "You need to see something," she said. She closed the door to Ava's office, pulled out her laptop, and plugged in the flash drive. Ava watched silently as the footage played. She saw herself collapse. She saw the chaos. She saw herself, vulnerable and human in a way she'd never allowed in that room. And then she saw him. A janitor. Scruffy. Unimportant in the company hierarchy. Rushing in when everybody else hesitated. She watched his hands compressing her chest. She watched him lean in to give breaths. She watched the life return to her body. By the time the video ended, Ava's hands were shaking. Not from weakness this time, but from anger. "How long have you had this?" she asked, her voice low. "A week," Nora said. "I've been gathering things." "What has HR done to him?" Ava asked. Nora swallowed. "They're investigating him," she said. "The way it's being framed, it's like he overstepped. Like he touched you without permission. Victor is worried about a scandal." "A scandal?" Ava repeated incredulously. "The scandal is that a man saved my life and we're punishing him for it." Nora nodded. "I agree," she said softly. "That's why I saved copies. There's more. Emails. Memos. I think Victor has been positioning this from the start. I think he wants you sidelined." Something clicked in Ava's mind. The subtle pressure. The concerns about her health. The way Victor had been stepping forward in her absence. She straightened up. "Call an emergency board meeting," she said. "This afternoon." Nora blinked. "Today?" she asked. "You just got cleared." "Today," Ava repeated. "Make sure Victor will be there. HR security. And find Ethan Cole." Nora's lips curled into the faintest smile. "It will be my pleasure," she said. At 3 p.m., the Sky boardroom filled once again. This time, the energy was different. There was tension in the air. Confusion. Curiosity. Victor sat near the head of the table, flipping through some documents, projecting calm. HR sat farther down, looking nervous. Security hovered at the edges. Nora stood near the door, waiting. And then Ava walked in. The room fell silent. "Miss Sterling," Victor said, rising. "We didn't expect." "Sit down, Victor," Ava said coolly. "This won't take long." He sat, lips tightening. A moment later, the door opened again. Ethan stepped in. He wore his regular clothes, not his uniform. A simple plaid shirt. Jeans. He held his hat in his hands, twisting it. He looked out of place. Small. Like a mechanic accidentally dropped into a royal banquet. His eyes widened as he realized where he was. "Nora, I think there's been a mistake," he whispered. "I don't belong." "You belong here," Nora said firmly. "Trust me." He swallowed and stepped forward. Ava's gaze softened when she saw him. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly. "Thank you for coming." He nodded awkwardly. "Yes," he said. "I got your message. I wasn't sure if—" "You're not in trouble," she said. "Not with me." Victor cleared his throat. "Miss Sterling, may I ask what this is about?" he said. "We have pressing matters." "This is a pressing matter," Ava said sharply. "The most pressing one, in fact, because it concerns the difference between truth and manipulation in this company." Murmurs rippled down the table. She turned to the board. 2 weeks ago, I collapsed in this room," she said. "I nearly died. I have since learned that immediate CPR was what kept me alive long enough for paramedics to arrive." She gestured toward Ethan. "The man who performed that CPR is standing right there," she said. All eyes turned to him. Some with surprise. Some with guilt. Victor's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said smoothly. "And as HR has been investigating, his methods may have." Ava held up a hand. "Before we hear any more about his supposed methods," she said, "I think we should watch something." "Nora." Nora stepped forward and connected the laptop to the room's main screen. Ethan's heart pounded as the footage began playing on the wall. He watched himself from above, like a ghost watching his own actions. He saw himself bursting into the room, kneeling beside her, starting compressions. He heard the subtle gasps from the board members as they saw it from this angle for the first time. He watched the crucial moment, him leaning in to give breaths. He tensed, expecting the worst. But Ava didn't pause there. She let the footage continue. They all saw her chest rise, her body jerk. The moment she came back, they saw the paramedics arrive. When the video ended, Ava turned slowly to HR. "Is this the footage you saw before placing Mr. Cole on leave?" she asked. The HR woman swallowed. Yes, she said quietly. And how? Ava continued. Did you come to the conclusion that this man had done anything wrong, based on this? The HR woman looked at Victor. Victor spoke up. As I explained before, he said, my concern was not intent, but perception. This video, taken out of context, could be. Who took it out of context? Ava asked sharply. Silence. She clicked the remote, switching the screen to a screenshot. It was the most incriminating frame, Ethan's mouth against hers, eyes closed in concentration. This image, she said, was attached to an internal memo I saw this morning. A memo suggesting that a janitor had behaved inappropriately while I was incapacitated. A memo that conveniently left out the rest of the footage we just saw. She turned to Victor. And that memo, she said, was written by you. Eyes widened. Heads turned. Victor's composure cracked just slightly. I was protecting the company, he said. If this image leaked. If this image leaked without context, Ava said, yes, it could be spun into something ugly. But the solution to that is not to vilify the man who did the right thing. The solution is to tell the truth. She looked around the room. Let me be absolutely clear, she said. This man saved my life. I am standing here today because he refused to wait for permission, because he acted when everyone else hesitated. And while he has been at home, wondering if he'll be able to feed his daughter, we have been discussing him like a problem to be managed. Her voice grew colder. That is not the kind of company I built. Some board members shifted guiltily. Victor tried again. With respect, Ava, he said, using her first name now like they were equals, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. We must always consider legal exposure. You may feel grateful to him, but if he decides to... Decides to what? She snapped. Tell the truth. That he heard someone scream, saw me dying on the floor, and did what none of you knew how to do. Go ahead. Let him tell that story. I want him to. She stepped closer to Ethan. I'm not ashamed that a janitor's mouth touched mine while he was giving me CPR, she said. I'm ashamed that anyone in this company thought that was the thing we needed to hide. That sentence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone in power was standing on his side. Victor's eyes narrowed. If you insist on making this public, he said slowly, you may be creating unnecessary risk. Investors may start questioning you. My what? Ava asked. My health. My competence. Funny you mention that, Victor. She nodded at Nora, who pulled up another document. This is a compilation of emails you've sent to certain board members over the past few months, Ava said. Emails implying that my health makes me unstable, that I'm too emotional to continue leading, that our stock would be safer in your hands. Gasps spread through the room. One board member raised his eyebrows. Is that true, Victor? He asked. Victor's mask slipped. I was being prudent, he said. Your collapse proved my point. My collapse proved that I'm human, Ava replied. It did not prove that you get to orchestrate a coup. She looked around the table. I trust this board to review these emails and determine whether they reflect the values of this company, she said. In the meantime, effective immediately, Victor Hale is suspended from all duties pending an independent investigation into his conduct. Victor shot to his feet. You can't. I can, she said calmly. And I just did. Security stepped forward. For the record, she added, you wanted to talk about perception? Here's one for you. The man who saved my life was almost fired, while the man who tried to exploit my health for power kept his seat at this table. Ask yourself which story people will respect more. Victor glared at Ethan on his way out. This isn't over, he muttered. Ethan met his gaze. For once, he didn't look away. When the dust settled, the board meeting officially adjourned. But Ava wasn't done. Mr. Cole, she said softly, turning to him as the others filed out. Could you stay for a moment? His heart pounded. He stayed. They were alone in the Sky boardroom now. The same room where she had almost died. The same room where he had knelt beside her, praying his hands weren't too late. She looked at the spot on the floor where she'd fallen, then back at him. I don't remember your face from that night, she said. Just your voice. Just the feeling of coming back. But I've seen the video. I know what you did. It was nothing, he said automatically. Anyone would have done the same. She shook her head. No, she said quietly. I've watched that video enough times to know that's not true. Everyone else froze. You didn't. He didn't know what to say to that. So he said the only thing that felt honest. I have a daughter, he said. When she was a baby, she almost died. The doctors barely made it in time. Since then, if someone can be saved, I can't just stand there. It's not in me. Ava's eyes softened. How old is she? She asked. 7, he said. Her name is Lily. A small smile tugged at her lips. You went on leave, she said. How have you been paying your bills? Partial pay, he said. We're staying afloat. For now. And if HR had decided against you? She asked. He exhaled slowly. I don't know, he admitted. Find another job. Any job. I'd clean 10 buildings if I had to. Why didn't you fight back? She asked. Go to the press. Sue, do something. He gave a short, bitter laugh. Who would they believe? He asked. A janitor with overdue bills, or a billion-dollar company with lawyers and PR? She nodded slowly. That's fair, she said. But you won't have to worry about that anymore. He frowned. What do you mean? He asked. She took a breath. I can't undo what happened, she said. I can't erase the fear or the humiliation of being treated like a problem when you were the solution. But I can do 2 things. She held up one finger. First, I can publicly set the record straight, she said. Not just internally, officially, with my voice on the record. So there's no room for whispers. If anyone ever tries to twist that night, they'll have to go through me. He swallowed. Okay, he said quietly. And second, she continued, I can offer you something better than a mop and a night shift. He blinked. I don't follow, he said. She smiled faintly. You were a janitor who knew CPR, she said. You acted faster than most people in positions of power. You kept your head. You pushed through fear. That tells me 2 things. You care, and you can perform under pressure. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. I just did what needed to be done, he said. Exactly, she replied. That's what this company needs. Not just at the top. At every level. She paused. What did you study before you started working here? She asked. He blinked in surprise. How did you? Background checks go both ways, she said lightly. Nora did some digging too. He sighed. Engineering, he said. I did 2 years. Then Lily was born, and school became a luxury I couldn't afford. Do you still want to finish? She asked. He hesitated. Want to? He repeated. Yes. Believe I can. That's harder. She crossed her arms. Mr. Cole, she said. You had the courage to break into a boardroom and put your hands on my chest to keep my heart beating. I promise you, you are capable of finishing a degree. He let out a choked laugh. When you put it like that, he murmured. She took a step closer. I want to offer you 2 things, she said. A full scholarship to finish your engineering degree, and a new position here. Not as janitor, as a trainee in our facilities engineering department. Day shift. Better pay. Room to grow. He stared at her. Why? He whispered. Because you saved my life, she said simply. And because this company needs people like you in rooms like this. People who don't freeze when it matters. Emotion clogged his throat. I don't know what to say, he stammered. Just say yes, she replied gently. For Lily. At the mention of his daughter's name, his eyes filled with tears. Yes, he said. Yes, of course yes. She smiled. Good, she said. Then everything really did change that night. A year later, the Sky boardroom looked different. New faces at the table. New energy. New policies. A strict, updated emergency response protocol. Regular CPR training for all staff and executives. A clear support system for whistleblowers and low-level staff who spoke up. And at the head of the table, still, stood Ava Sterling. Healthier, stronger, more open about her limitations, but also more confident in her leadership. The investigation into Victor Hale had ended with him being removed from the company entirely. Internal emails, manipulative memos, and power grab strategies had sealed his fate. Last anyone knew, he was consulting somewhere far from Sterling Tower. His reputation never quite the same. Nora had been promoted to chief of staff. And Ethan no longer rode the service elevator with a mop bucket. He wore a badge that said facilities engineering trainee and carried a tablet instead of a cart. His days were filled with blueprints, systems, and learning how the building's guts worked. Its vac, its power, its backup systems. He still took the bus to work. He still packed Lily's lunch. But when Lily said, "My dad works at the Sterling Tower," there was a new kind of pride in her voice. One afternoon, after a training session, Ethan stood by a window on the 40th floor, looking out at the city. A familiar voice spoke behind him, still getting used to the view. He turned. Ava stood there, hands in her pockets. "Doesn't get old," he admitted. She smiled. "Got a second?" she asked. "Always," he said. They walked to a quieter corner. "I wanted you to see something before we release it," she said, handing him a printed statement. He read it slowly. It was a press release. Sterling Group announces new emergency response initiative, inspired by employee hero. The statement told the full story. How she had collapsed. How an employee, Ethan Cole, had performed CPR. How that act had saved her life. How the company was now rolling out mandatory CPR training for all staff, plus sponsoring citywide CPR education programs. "It's a lot," he said softly. "It's the truth," she replied. "And it's about more than you and me now. It's about what happens when ordinary people do extraordinary things, and how companies respond." "You're really putting my name in this?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "You were okay staying in the shadows before. But I think it matters that people know who you are. That janitors, assistants, drivers, receptionists, they all see that we value more than titles." He nodded slowly. Lily was going to frame this thing. He could already hear her. "That's my dad," she'd say. "He saved her life." "You okay?" Ava asked gently. He wiped at his eyes quickly, laughing. "Yeah," he said. "Just a lot for a guy who used to worry about getting in trouble for being in the wrong hallway." She smiled. "Sometimes the wrong hallway leads you to the right story," she said. He looked at her. "I never really apologized," he said. "For what?" she asked, genuinely confused. "For, he said awkwardly, "putting my mouth on yours without asking." She laughed, a light, real laugh. "If we're keeping score," she said, "I think I owe you an apology for almost dying on your watch." He shook his head. "Fair enough," he said, smiling. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. She said softly, "I've thought a lot about that night. About how close it was. About how many things had to line up just right for me to still be here. And one thing keeps coming back to me." "What's that?" he asked. "That you were exactly where you were supposed to be," she said. "A single dad janitor, in the right place at the right time, with the courage to act." He looked out at the city. "Funny," he said, "because for years, I thought I was exactly where I wasn't supposed to be. Like I'd fallen off my path and I'd never get back on it. Like I'd missed my one chance." He glanced at her. "Turns out," he added, "sometimes your second chance comes disguised as a disaster." She nodded. "And sometimes," she said, "it comes disguised as a kiss." He laughed. "A life-saving one," he said quickly. "Of course," she replied, eyes twinkling. "The best kind." Looking back, there were so many moments where this story could have gone differently. If Ethan had stayed behind the glass, afraid of breaking the rules. If Victor's version of the story had become the only version. If Ava had decided it was easier to quietly handle the mess instead of confronting it head-on. But that's the thing about choices. They're small when you make them. Huge when you look back. So here's what this story whispers to you. If you've ever felt small in a big system, if you've ever felt like your title, your bank account, or your past mistakes disqualify you from doing something meaningful, remember Ethan. He was just a janitor. Until he wasn't. He was a tired single dad. Until the moment he became a hero, not because someone gave him permission, but because he refused to stand still when it mattered. And if you've ever been in a place of power, or want to be someday, remember Ava's part of this story too. She could have protected the brand instead of the truth. She could have sacrificed a good man to save herself the discomfort of a messy narrative. But she chose to stand beside him, to tell the full story, to fix the system that almost broke him. Maybe you know what it feels like to be on one side of that equation. Maybe both. If you've ever been punished for doing the right thing, or silenced when you tried to speak up, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy. You are not weak. And your courage is not wasted. Even if people don't see it right away, even if someone like Victor tries to twist it, the truth has a way of finding the light. If you believe that integrity matters more than image, if you believe that the person cleaning the floor might have more courage than the person sitting at the head of the table, if you've ever been the small one who still chose to do the right thing when it counted, then you are exactly the kind of person stories like this are about. And hey, if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a time you had to stand up, or a time you wish you had, I'd love to hear about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your own I did the right thing even when it hurt moment. And if you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary people facing impossible situations, about power, truth, and second chances, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. Because somewhere out there right now, another janitor is standing outside another boardroom, hearing a thud and a scream, and the choice they make in the next 5 seconds might change everything.